My mother has been controlling my life, and then one fateful day, my friend Claire makes me discover a secret about my mother. Ever since I was a child, I've been looking after my mom. She's always been ill, and I've just accepted that it's my role in life to look after her. No one chooses the hand that life deals you, and so I would never let my mom suffer when I can just look after her. I have to admit that there's been times when I've been resentful, when I've not been able to do the things people my age can do. But I've always reassured myself that if the roles were reversed, my mom would look after me. First, some background of my situation. It's always been just my mom and I, as my dad left when I was a toddler, and I have no memory of him at all. I've never met him, and all I have are some old photos which show that I've grown to look like him. My mom told me he was not a good man and abandoned us when she got sick because he didn't want to look after an ill wife and a small child. I've never had a reason to doubt her version of events, and I've never actively looked for my father or any of his family. As far as I was aware, he has never tried to contact me either. So, Mom and I have only ever had each other, and she has no family. It's always been my role to care for her. My mom has multiple sclerosis, and was told she had it when I was a baby. It's a hard disease to live with, and she has a lot of problems with her mobility and pain. She doesn't trust doctors, so she copes on her own. A few times when her illness has been bad, I've tried to get her to go to the hospital, but she always cries and said the doctors will just pump you full of drugs, which makes you worse, and she refuses to go. She told me that she had a bad experience with a doctor not long after she was told she had the disease, and so now she would rather just deal with the symptoms with painkillers and my help. I always thought she was very brave, and she was an inspiration to me. Recently, things have changed in my life, and I'm finding myself torn between my mom and the life that I want. I'm rushing ahead, so let me tell you what that exactly means. Because my mom cannot get a job, I work to support us both. I have to work around her needs, and so I work at the library, which is very close to our house. My boss has always been very understanding of the times where I had to leave early to help my mom, or where I've not been able to come in. I've been able to work from home at times, updating the records and dealing with things on the computer that need doing. I have to admit that I love being at work, and so I prefer to have those few hours in the library where I can just focus and relax a little. I've always loved reading, and being surrounded by books is like a little calming oasis for me. At work, I made a good friend, Claire. Claire supports me and helps me when I'm feeling run down. I don't like to overburden her with my worries about Mother, but Claire has always been a shoulder to lean on. I told Mom I would introduce them one day, but Mom shot down the idea almost immediately. She said she was ashamed of her life and would prefer not to have strangers see her in this condition. My mom has put a lot on weight, and she's fairly immobile. She spends her days in a reclining chair, and on the few times she can be tempted to leave the house with me, well, she uses a wheelchair. I've seen photos of her as a younger woman, and she was slim, attractive. I think she's slightly bitter about how she looks now. She sometimes picks apart my appearance, but I've realized that it was because she misses who she was able to be before she was sick. I try not to hold it against her, and when I'm at home, I don't wear makeup or nice clothes so that she's not reminded of how much she's lost. When I go to work, I have to dress nicely, and that's when my mom usually has little digs at me. They're usually comments about how much makeup I'm wearing, or my skirt's too short and my heels are too high. I never go out, and so when I can dress nice, I make the most of it. Recently, my mom's been having a lot of medical issues, and I've been run ragged caring for her. She cannot even bathe herself, and so I have to bathe her on her bed. It's been frustrating, as Claire had been asking me to come for dinner with her, but Mom has been ill so much it's not even possible. Claire finally suggested we do lunch instead when I was at work, as then I would already be out of the house. Weirdly, Claire told me this would be a last-minute thing, so it would most likely be a case of one day she told me we were going. When I told my mom, she didn't seem interested. Unfortunately, she came down with a bad time, and I was forced to take a few days off of work. When I returned, Claire announced that we were going to lunch that day, and so we went to a lovely cafe to meet her friends. There were a few couples and a guy named Dan, who I sat next to. He was nice. He was clever, interesting, and shared a love of literature, the same as me. And the lunch passed rather quickly. The whole time Claire kept wiggling her eyebrows at me, and as if we were leaving Dan asking me for my phone number. Well, I gladly gave it to him, but explained that I cared for my disabled mother, and so I didn't have much free time outside of work. I saw him exchange a look with Claire, but I did not think much of it. As time goes by, I realize now that Claire suspected things about my mom that I would never accept or believe. It's only as things have progressed that I've begun to see things that seem strange, which is why I'm putting my experience into words. If nothing else, it'll prove that everything people are saying about my mom is wrong. You see, as my friendship with Claire is developing, a relationship with Dan has gone on, they're beginning to question me about my mother. They seem to feel it's an abusive relationship which my mom's taking pure advantage of me. I've agreed to try and look at our lives as an outsider and write down what happens. I'm scared that I'm going to have to choose between my mom and the man I'm starting to fall in love with. I have no idea what to do. Who should come first? My mom or my friends? Should I even have to choose? I don't know. Well, I guess I just have to keep going and see what happens. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a great day. This story is about to heat up a little bit. We have 4 updates to jump into. Now we're going to see what's going on with Update 1, and OP can just not accept the fact that the mother's using her. In her own words, if you're not subscribed to the channel, take a second and click that subscribe button. Here's your update. I'm still not ready to accept that my mother's using me. She's an ill woman, and it seems so unfair that my friends don't see that. I'm torn. I wrote the first part of the story a week ago, and I was not sure if I would ever write anything else, as it seemed so ridiculous to me. However, the last few days I've started to have a nagging feeling in my mind that they may be onto some truth to what they're saying. But I really don't think that my mom's being cruel. I'm her daughter. She loves me. We've only ever had each other, and it's so understandable that she wants me to stay with her. I should probably catch you up to where we are. As the first thing I wrote was an overview, it made me look as though things had happened a lot quicker than they actually did. I met Dan 8 months ago for the first time, and we've been dating ever since. He's never met my mom, and she does not seem keen to have a meeting with him. I've told her it would mean so much to me if she would just meet him, but so far it has not been accepted. Dan is also growing frustrated with the situation, and he said that he feels like he has to put in an application to my mom just to have time with me. I don't think it's that bad, but I have to admit we don't see each other as much as I would like to either. Last night there was a situation which has caused problems, and I'm becoming aware that my living situation could quite literally destroy my entire chance of ever having a marriage and children. I'm not sure how I feel now, as it feels so selfish to want to have my own life, with my mother as ill as she is and she needs me. Claire rolled her eyes so hard when I said that. She argued that loads of people around the world have MS, and there are many things in place to help. It seems strange to Claire that my mom will not accept help from anyone except for me. She'll not even meet my friends. Dan was silent the whole time we talked, and I felt his eyes on my face the whole time with pressure. I had to admit that I still blush whenever he looks at me. He's such a wonderful man, and I don't want to lose him. I need to find a way to have a life with him and make sure Mother's happy. Anyways, I changed the subject away from my mom, as Claire was beginning to get much angrier than normal. She said she was frustrated that I could not see that I was being used as a maid, a nurse, and a general dog. I said that was out of order, as she did not even know my mother. Dan finally spoke up to say, "And why's that? Your mother refuses to meet us?" It was at this point that I felt I was being hit from all angles with disapproval, and then I started to get upset. I said I was sorry, but I needed to go as I could not deal with what they were saying. I'd also promised Mom that I would not be out too long. Claire sighed and shook her head, and Dan just smiled sadly as I grabbed my things and practically ran out of the restaurant. I cried all the way home as I had a feeling that I may have damaged my relationship with both Claire and Dan. When I got home, Mom was where I left her on her chair. She was moaning and complaining about having pain. She said she's been waiting for so long for me to get back and she needs me. I was frustrated with everything that I literally snapped at my mom. I told her I had left her everything she needed on the table next to her chair, and I'd only been gone less than 2 hours. Maybe if she let me arrange someone to look after her when I was at work or out with friends, she would not even need to be without anything. She snapped back at me that it seemed like I was sick of my own mother, and maybe I'd be happier if she was just dead. Well, that was the final straw for me that night, and I gave her everything she needed and giving her a blanket, and I went to bed. I could not cope with all the demands on me, and I felt as though I was absolutely losing my mind. When I undressed and tucked up in the bed I had slept in since I was a young child, I sent a group text to Claire and Dan. I said I wanted to talk to them, and I was sorry about how I acted. I was under so much pressure, I felt as though I was about to break. Well, they replied really quickly, reassuring me they were not angry with me. They had been really worried recently that I looked ill and exhausted all the time. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, and I had to admit I was not looking my best at all. I was pale and had large bags under my eyes. Well, you could probably describe them as suitcases with matching hand luggage. They were that big. I'd ask if we could meet the following day as I was at work, and so my mom would not be able to make demands on me. They agreed, and we said goodnight. You might be wondering why I suddenly so determined to have a chat after I've defended my mom so hard in front of them, right? The thing is, when I got home tonight, something seemed off. My mom had said she'd been stuck in her chair all night, 2 hours, and had been unable to get painkillers or a drink to take them. When I had left, I had filled up her glass with the fresh orange juice, and when I got back, it had water in it. Something did not add up, and for the first time ever, I wondered if I was being played like a fiddle by my mother. The one and only way she could have gotten water would be if she's gotten up and got it herself. If she had done that, then she was more capable than I thought. Of course, all it meant was she had been able to walk from her chair to the kitchen, which is a whole 10 steps away, but I wondered if maybe I was just coddling her more than I needed to. Tomorrow, I would talk to Claire and Dan and see what they thought. I would not mention it to Mom as she did not react well to confrontation. And, I could be wrong. I'll update once I talk to my friends and see if we can work out a way to help my mom gain some sort of independence from me. Update number 2. When I woke up in the morning, I was already doubting myself. I also realized that I had stormed off and left my mom in her chair. To be fair, she quite often slept in the chair when she did not feel well enough to go to bed, but I felt awful that I've not given her a choice. I went to the living room and apologized for the night before, and she seemed okay, but a bit sulky. I helped her get washed and changed, made her breakfast, and brought her everything she needed whilst I was at work. Someone asked me how she goes to the toilet whilst I'm out if she's immobile. Well, she has a bedpan, which she can shuffle under herself, and I deal with it when I get home. It's not pleasant, but hey, it works. When she's really bad, I suggested asking a doctor about having a catheter fitted, but she refused point blank as she'll not see any doctors. Anyways, moving forward from that unpleasant topic, she did try and ask me not to go to work as she was upset about the night before, and being upset made her symptoms much worse. But for the first time in my life, I lied and said there was no way that I could not go into work today as there was an important meeting that I did not attend. I could lose my job. As we were really on an income to live, she did not push the matter further, and I got ready to head out. As I left, I said to call me if she needs something, but I would be in a meeting from 12 p.m. for a couple hours. In a way, it wasn't really a full lie, as I would be in a meeting with Claire and Dan, and if she knew that, she'd probably call me. Slowly, I was beginning to see that she seemed to need the most when I was doing something for myself, and I did not like how that thought made me feel. Claire was at work that morning with me, and at lunchtime we went to meet Dan. I took a deep breath and told them what I had noticed the night before about the drinks. I said I was worried and I was wrong, that maybe I had left water as well as a juice. But there were things that were starting to make me question my life with my mom. Claire, a bit dramatically I thought, threw her hands above her head and said, "Finally!" I stared at her in shock. Claire reached over to hold my hand and said in the whole time that she's known me, I've never seemed happy. My whole life was work and caring for my mom. At first, she thought I was doing an amazing doting job as a daughter, but things did not add up when my mom refused to meet anyone or allow me to try to arrange extra care for her. She told me about another woman she knew who had MS, and she had told Claire how they were at many stages of MS, some requiring more care than others, but my mom should be working as hard as she could to make the most out of her life and not staying in one room the whole time. MS doesn't mean your life is over, and there were support groups in the city. I laughed and said there's no way in heck my mom's going to go to a support group. Dan looked directly at me and said, "Well, maybe it's time to be a bit more forceful. You live entirely by her rules, and that's no life for you. Why would your mom not want to meet your friends and your fiancé?" That knocked me for 6. Dan's kinda awkward, and I guess that was just the best proposal I was going to get. I managed to stutter, You want to marry me, even after all this?" And then he produced a lovely ring from his pocket and said, "Claire," she was shaking her hand in laughter at how awkward we both were. "She said we were made for each other." I obviously said yes. Dan took the hand that Claire was holding and said, "Well, I think it's time to meet your mother. I'm going to be a part of the family soon after all." Well, I got really upset, as I knew my mom would refuse. Once I told her, and I was not entirely sure how she would react to the proposal. Maybe I could just not tell her, I thought, before realizing how stupid that was. I also realized that I was trying to put my mom first yet again. Claire looked at me and said that my mistake was always asking for permission first, which gave my mom a chance to say no. The house was as much my home as my mother's, so I had the right to bring friends over, especially my fiancé. It was time to just rip the plaster off the wound and take people home without telling her first. I wasn't sure how good of an idea that was going to be, or how Mom seemed to react badly to things out of her control. And honestly, I was worried about setting a relapse off. That would mean more work for me, and would set my mom against Claire and Dan probably forever. I said that I would think about it, and Claire winked at Dan, saying they would get me to get my life back one baby step at a time. Lunch went by so quickly, and before long I had to get back to work. I promised Dan I would work at a good day for him to come to the house, and with a kiss, I practically floated away back to work in an infinite bliss. I'm slightly ashamed of this, but when I got home, I took off that beautiful ring Dan had given me and put it in my purse. I was not ready to deal with my mom's reaction, and the good daughter in me knew that a shock could indeed make her ill. That was the main reason I was so scared to just allow Claire and Dan to turn up at the house. Back at home, I pretended everything was normal, and I dealt with all my mom's needs before falling into bed. Exhausted, as always. So much has happened, and I need time to process and plan my next few steps. This is a difficult thing for OP to have to deal with. What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. We're about to hop into Update 3. I hope you guys are enjoying the content so far. Here is your update. I think the following day, my mom knew something that had changed, as she was much more demanding than usual. She refused to get out of bed and had me running all around like a headless chicken fetching her things. My early afternoon, I was exhausted. I've been texting Dan all morning, and I think the smile on my face told my mom that something had happened. It is only now that I realize that it's not normal for a parent to be so unhappy that their child's happy. I was supposed to be at work that afternoon, but about an hour before Mom had a big relapse and she was very weak and ill. I had no choice but to phone in sick and say that I would work from home, as my mom needed me. I text Dan and Claire to tell them I would not be able to meet them that day either. In a way, I think my mother brought what happened next on herself. I'm still trying to process what happened in the days that followed, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully, truly understand how my life turned out like it did. I've tried to write down the things that went on so many times, but it upsets me, and I just can't seem to commit to paper how much of a gullible idiot I've been. I've lost so much of my life to nothing but a lie. I always thought I was an intelligent person, but it turns out I could not see the facts that were staring me right in the face right under my nose. How could I be so blind and trusting? I was going to write the whole sad story here, but I just need some more time. I'll be back with the longer updates, but I wanted to just get on paper one thing with this update. My mom lied. She was never sick. She doesn't even have MS. I need a bit more time, but I'll update as soon as I'm feeling strong enough to finish the story of how my own mother, flesh and blood, lied to me my whole life about everything. Well guys, Mr. Redito here. That update was a bombshell. Turns out the mother's just a big old liar. Guys, there's one final update. It came out 10 days after that last post, and you will not believe what's about to go down. Here we go. Update number 4. It's been 10 days since I found out the truth, and I think I'm ready to tell the whole story. Claire and Dan, they're here, and they think this will be therapeutic for me. Everything changed the day Mom caused me to phone in sick. I was talking to Claire and Dan by text message, and I never phoned people when I was at home as it upset Mother. What I did not know at the time was that Claire and Dan had a plan. They were going to Justin turn up at my house later that day. They knew that if I had known that they were planning to come, I would have done everything in my power to stop them. And so they figured it was easier to just not tell me in advance. Little did I know their decision would change my life completely. My early afternoon, I was exhausted, and when the knock sounded on the door, I assumed it was just a delivery or the postman. I was shocked when I opened the door to see Claire and Dan standing on the doorstep with bags of takeout and a huge smile on their face. I managed to splutter, "What are you doing here?" Before Claire pushed past me into the house. "We're here to take lunch with you," Dan said, kissing me on my cheek. Although I was so happy to see him, my heart was pounding against my ribcage as I've heard Claire say hello to my mother. I knew there's no way this could go well. I followed Claire into the living room with Dan behind me, and when I saw the look in my mom's eyes, I knew that she was furious. She immediately started complaining that she was not well enough for visitors, and she really did not think she could cope with having people that she did not know in the house. I started to worry, as if she got stressed, her MS would start, and then I would be responsible for dealing with the fallout. Dan just squeezed my hand reassuringly, and I tried to worry less. Anyways, I could go on for ages about the build-up to the crisis, but the final straw was then Dan introduced himself as my fiancé. That was when my mother lost it. She started to roll her eyes back into her head, saying she's feeling a relapse coming. She moaned and grabbed her chest, and if I'm honest, I thought that we had given her a heart attack. She's a big lady, you know, and Claire looked at her and something seemed to click in her eyes. Claire took out her phone and phoned an ambulance. I tried to stop her, saying my mom hated doctors and did not trust them, but Claire insisted that if Mom was having this bad of an issue, it was better to be safe. I could see the panic in my mom's eyes, but at the time I thought it was because she was scared of the hospital. I didn't realize at the time she was worried about being caught and her nasty web of lies. She tried to say she felt a bit better, but it was too late and the ambulance was already en route. The paramedics turned up, and my mom tried everything in her arsenal to stop them from taking her to the hospital. But Claire and Dan laid it on thick about how they were sure she was having heart issues and insisted she needed to be checked out. The paramedics looked at me as her daughter, and Dan nodded at me, so I went against everything I had growing up knowing and said she had to go. Mom was screaming about betrayal as they loaded her into the ambulance, and I was absolutely in tears. But Dan said it needed to be done. The hospital would convince her she needed more help, and doing everything on my own was just going to wear me out, and I should be able to see and have a life. Dan drove Claire and I to the hospital, and we sat in the relatives' waiting room while the doctor checked my mother out. Finally, a doctor came to talk to me. He told me that Mom's heart was fine and suggested it was more likely she just had a panic attack. I told him that my mom often found change, and shock made her MS worse, so that was probably the issue. The doctor looked confused at me and said, MS? She did not tell me she had that, and she said she was feeling just a little bit off. I told him all about her medical history and her distrust of doctors, so she was probably trying to avoid the issue. The doctor arranged for a scan to check her brain to make sure the MS was not playing up. That is when my mom's lie all fell to pieces, crumbled in front of me like a cookie on Christmas Eve. There was no sign of MS. She'd made the whole dang thing up to keep me under her thumb. I could not take it at that moment and first argued that there was a mistake. But the doctor said, oh no, there's no mistake. They told me my mom's healthy as an ox. The only problem is she's overweight. That conversation broke me. My mom had lied to me my whole life. She had used me as her servant so she could just be a lazy person. I'd given up my chance to go to university. I'd given up my chance to follow a career that I loved and make friends because of her sick little lies. My mom was asking to see me, but I just left. I went home and packed a bag, and I've been staying with Dan ever since. I'll never forgive my mom for what she's done. I've grown up never having my own life. She's been calling me left and right, leaving me messages constantly, but I've told her that I may be able to talk to her in town. But just so she knows, our relationship is over, and she needs to sort her life out for herself. Dan and I are getting married next year, and he's encouraging me to go to university and regain the life I've always dreamt of. I'm so grateful to Claire and Dan for never giving up on me and seeing something in my mom that I couldn't before. I spent my whole life living with her and never having my own day. My mom's totally on her own now, and that's her own fault. I'm questioning all the stories she's told me about my life, and once I get back to my feet, I'm planning on looking for my father and seeing if I have a family I just simply never knew about. A lie almost ruined my life, but guys, you know what they say, there's some light at the end of a tunnel. The level of manipulation and deceit and basically just straight up betrayal that this mother made OP go through is absolutely toxic. I'm gonna guess there's some mental health issues that are in play. Definitely need some therapy or some sort of psychologist just to figure out what's going on with this mother. She might rank top 5 most vile of the month out of all the stories we've read. But guys, let me know your decision and your thoughts and your opinions on it. If you were in OP's position, what would you do? And also, just imagine Claire never came into her life, or her future husband. If she never met them, she would have been stuck where she was in the same scenario every day, waking up to the same situation. Guys, I would like to know your thoughts on this. Drop them down below in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I read stories every single day. If you want more stories, check out my other channels too in the description below. Have an amazing day, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.